But we're turning now to our press review. And Ukrainian officials have begun gradually restoring power to cities, including Kyiv, after Russian missile strikes earlier this week caused those massive outages. Some Ukrainian media have been documenting all of this. Deeptik Laurent is here to take us through it.
Well, Sharon, we thought we'd take a different angle in the press today and look at what the Ukrainian press is saying. They've actually been documenting what life is like under these power outages. Lots of good articles illustrating really the difficulties of life after those Russian missile strikes on Wednesday. The Kyiv Independent reporting that millions are still without electricity after those mass strikes by Russia on Wednesday. About 70% of residents in the capital, Kyiv, were still without power yesterday, even if power is slowly being restored. The Kyiv Independent's really become sort of an independent voice in the war in Ukraine. They posted this picture here of residents completely in the dark at a bus stop. It's a reality for millions of Ukrainians. And the Kyiv Independent notes that this is all setting in as wintry sub-zero temperatures start to set in Ukraine. The journalists at Kyiv Independent themselves are working in under very difficult conditions. The Kyiv Independent posted this on Twitter, a picture of their staff working by candlelight as a result of those electricity cuts. But remaining defiant and resilient in the face of these difficulties. In their tweet here, they say, we'd like to let you know we have no intention of interrupting our work. And they posted this very evocative picture of all of them working by candlelight. And it really does speak to the resilience of Ukrainians. It's something that Le Figaro, the French paper, is looking at in this article today here, really admiringly explaining that without water or running water or electricity, the residents of Kyiv are still managing to defy those Russian strikes. The paper really hailing them for their resistance in the face of this new Russian strategy to attack power grids, sort of retaliation for Russia's humiliating defeats in the war in Ukraine so far. One man is quoted by Le Figaro, a Kyiv resident, as explaining that he'd been imprisoned in Donetsk, and he says, he faced worse things in prison than power cuts, and that he's remaining absolutely defiant to stay in his city and to stay defiant in the face of these Russian attacks. Sharon.
And Deepti, moving on to the UN's International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's something we've been covering here on France 24. It's also getting a lot of attention in the illustrated press. Take us through that.
Well, according to a UN report released this week, around 81,000 women and girls were murdered last year, and half of that number around 50,000, just a bit more, of women and children and girls were killed by a male relative or partner, so domestic violence. And this is something that the cartoonists, particularly French cartoonists, are looking at. This is by Bernard Bouton, a French cartoonist, who really highlights the reality of domestic violence for women ordinary women, he says, the ordinary lives of women and how they're upended by domestic violence. Here you see this woman with these blue spots on her dress that become blue flowers on her wedding day and eventually become bruises in her married life. So very telling of the sort of evolution of domestic violence. There's another cartoon by Bernard Bouton as well. This one is another scene of domesticity, if you like. You have this woman here cooking a meal or pouring a meal onto a plate, but there's a knife stabbed in her back.
Only cartoons, Deepti, but they are very poignant images, aren't they? Moving on to local elections then. They're taking place in Taiwan this weekend, and they're being seen really as a test for China's influence on the island, aren't they?
Yeah, Sharon, those local elections take place every 4 years. They've been likened by some, at least some quoted by The Guardian, to Taiwan's midterm elections, if you like. It'll be the first national vote since China's massive military escalation on the island of Taiwan. Now, the KMT is the main opposition party. It's traditionally seen as close to Beijing, even if the party denies that it is pro-China. The DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, is a governing party. They're seen as pro-independence. And that race is really being played out in the capital of Taipei City. The mayoral race for that city is pitting Chiang Wan-ang from the KMT against Chen Shih-chung from the ruling DPP party. Now, the Taipei Times editorial today gives us a little bit of history behind these two parties, explaining that the KMT, the opposition party that's linked to China, has a deep blue faction that's always viewed Taiwanese people who emigrated in the centuries before the Second World War with suspicion and contempt. Well, now the Taipei Times editor says these are the people who are masters of the island of Taiwan, so it's time to give them the respect that they deserve.
Finally from you, Deepti. Robert Downey Jr. is the most recent celebrity to have a clean-shaven head, and it's inspired the Daily Telegraph to have a look at some other celebs who they think look better bald.
Well, to be fair, Robert Downey Jr. did shave his head for an upcoming role, not because he's balding, but still, it doesn't matter because the Daily Telegraph is looking at how male pattern baldness afflicts everyone, even the most famous. But some celebrities have managed to turn their balding into a signature statement. Indeed, balding is no trivial matter, and the decision to shave one's head can be a painful decision for men who might feel like they're losing their identity. But the Daily Telegraph explains that some have managed to sort of turn it into a statement. This is Stanley Tucci, who won an Emmy this year for a documentary series he filmed. As you can see here, you could embrace your balding life with a pair of thick-rimmed glasses that frames your face. The Telegraph says, after all, the future King of England, Prince William himself, is a poster boy for baldness as well. He was even named Sexiest Bald Man of the Year last year. If you're game, you could be like The Rock and beef up your body to sort of match your balding head. You could also follow perhaps in the footsteps of Bruce Willis, who I think is the most famous, sexiest bald celebrity. And in fact, I don't think I've ever seen a movie in which he has hair.
Thanks, Deepti. That's Deepti Laurent with our press review.